Hello and welcome to Dateline New Haven on WNHH, New Haven's home for community radio. I'm Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the headlines of the stories that make community tick. Well, it seems like the world's going crazy these days, but there are some things going on that might not make you crazy, and our guest today is going to talk about a few of those. Sean Scanlon, he's a state rep from Guilford. He's the director of the Tweed New Haven Airport at a time of historic expansion. And he's been exploring a run for state comptroller, which is a more important job that you might have never heard of, that we're going to tell you about a little bit. Sean Scanlon, thanks for coming.
Good to be here. I'm just trying to make sure I actually shared this correctly on my social media platform.
All right, you take another moment for that.
I think I did.
So, Sean, I want to talk about all three aspects.
Sure.
But I want to ask you first how your exploratory campaign for comptroller is coming.
You know, it's going well. It's a strange time to explore a run for statewide office. Most of the time that I've been doing this for like a month and a half has been on Zoom. Last night I did go to the Bristol Democratic Town Committee in person. So
did they have masks?
Not a lot of masks there.
Because, the wastewater is showing like 99% of COVID is gone.
Is gone. Yeah.
It'll come back up.
It varies. Starting to see a little bit more in person, but a lot of it is on Zoom. And it's a strange way to kind of get out there and talk to people. But, it's going well so far.
That is weird to be, because politics is such, especially when you're not in the national game, it's such a face-to-face enterprise.
It is.
It's such a human.
When I've talked to people who have done this before and run statewide before, they sort of say, oh my God, you're so lucky because you can just do it from your Zoom living room. I actually like to go in person and see people.
Why would you be in politics if you don't?
Yeah, it's weird. It's just, and you go a few minutes early, you talk to people before the meeting starts, you hang around after.
And body language?
Body language is huge. I mean, you're on Zoom. Half people have their camera off. You make a joke, and there's no laughing.
First, you have to wait and see if they laugh.
Everyone is on mute, and so am I bombing? Am I doing well? Nobody knows, right? Because it's just a weird thing. And so many people are just so sick and tired of being on Zoom that
I'm done with it.
The last thing you want to do is sit and listen to a politician talk at like 8:45 at night about freaking Comptroller. So, I like the in-person. It was fun to do that at Bristol last night, and hopefully I'll be doing more in person.
And how do you tailor what you're doing? Do you make fewer jokes? Do you catch up with the people afterwards for coffee?
It's a lot of phone calls and then these meetings, but again, it's a very strange thing, and I like people. I mean, I got involved in politics because
why would you do it? If you
I like people, and I like to get out there. And one of the things I love the most when I worked for Chris Murphy when he was running for Senate, I would love to just go into different towns and you pick the coffee shop downtown and you pick the restaurant and you sort of get a feel for the local town. And you just don't get that in this kind of way. And so, again, I think now that things are getting a little bit better, it'll change a bit. But for the first month and a half of me doing this, it's been almost all on Zoom.
So what have you learned?
Well, what I've learned is that there's an inherent, I would say, angst out there amongst people, right? Where people are sick and tired of COVID. They want to get back to their life. There are contradictions in our economy where, by a lot of measures, the economy is doing great. We've had historic growth. We have low unemployment. Job growth is incredible right now. And yet most people feel like the economy is terrible. And a lot of that has to do with inflation, obviously. But that does make a difference to people when they talk to me. And I think, I'm learning a lot about the state. I think there's a misconception, and I knew this because I work for Chris, that the state is all the same because it's so small. No, every single city and town in the state
down by Pomfret,
is different, right? Bristol is so different than Brantford, right?
And
Brantford is different than Bridgeport, right? Yeah. And I love that. I love that we have a very diverse state, and I love getting around and talking to folks.
I've been trying to figure this out about the economy. I know inflation's real, but so is record unemployment. So is people's bank accounts are bigger than they've ever been. People get to leave jobs because they have more freedom. So is greater earning power. Do you think it's because whoever's the president is just going to be bombarded by the other party and the opposition media so that everyone thinks things are terrible even if they're fine?
I think that's a big part of it. I think we've crossed the Rubicon in terms of people and swing voters, right? You either hate Joe Biden or you like him, just like you either hated Donald Trump or you liked him.
So while gas prices are real and while your pay increase might not be quite as much as inflation, while for many years it was much higher than inflation, but your bank account's bigger, you got more job freedom,
Well, it's just easier to blame the politician you don't like for all the things that you don't like about your life.
Yeah.
And
we're all going a little bit nuts. I mean, Vladimir Putin might be going very nuts. We'll see what you think
yeah,
about
but
that.
again, I think that's 2 years of COVID, right?
Yeah.
It's just it's taken a toll on everybody, and we've had some intense discussions about COVID with regard to masks and kids. There are some people who think that everyone else doesn't agree that it's been terrible. COVID has been terrible. It sucks. It sucks for people.
And I think
it sucks
people
for
find
kids.
other things they freak out about. We all have. Like we've gone like way over the edge about something. Then the next day say, why did I just do that?
Yeah. Well, I think we're hopefully getting out of the worst of this and figuring out what the new normal looks like. And I think as part of that, you'll start to see people feel better about where things are going. My opinion. But
so you're exploring a run for state comptroller. That's the OMPT. We went through that last time. Give me the elevator pitch. Why you're running and why it should be you.
Well, again, I'm not running. I'm just exploring. So I want to be clear about that distinction because there is quite a bit of a distinction there. But the reason why I'm exploring it with a focus on that job is because I really believe that while most people have no idea what that job is, that job really, really is important. And it's really, really important in the aftermath of COVID because it deals with all the things that matter to people: healthcare, the budget, pensions, the state financing system, all of these things that job has a seat at the table for. But more than that, Paul, what that job can be is, like all statewide jobs, it's a bully pulpit for which you can use it to talk about the things that you care about. And the reasons I got involved in politics, like healthcare and the budget, are things that you can really influence through that job. And that's why I'm talking to folks about whether or not they think I'm a good fit for it.
And just very specifically, it's the chief financial officer of the state. You oversee payroll and benefits for 65,000 employees. You negotiate the healthcare plans. You serve as the top fiscal watchdog, issuing monthly budget reports. And not like the auditors who pick something to go deep, but you're saying how everything's going with the budgets. That's pretty important.
It's really important, yeah.
And so what made and going back, you felt your job at running the airport kind of gave you some of the skills in working on the budget committee.
Well, it's
the finance committee at the
two things. I got involved in politics because I wanted to help people, and I got involved in healthcare specifically because when I was growing up, I was raised by a single mom. My family is from here in New Haven originally. And when my mom was growing up, she was a small business owner. She never had health insurance. And so I saw her, when everyone else was kind of going to the doctor and they would pay with a card, she would pay cash. We would go to CVS Pharmacy in Guilford, where I grew up, and she'd be begging the pharmacist, hey, do you have a generic alternative? Because I can't afford the $300 brand name drug that this doctor prescribed me. And so when I got to Hartford in my second term, the Speaker of the House actually named me as the chair of the insurance committee. And I spent 4 years of my life trying to make healthcare more accessible and affordable in Connecticut, passed a number of laws that I'm really proud of, and worked a lot with Kevin Lembo, who was the state comptroller for 10 years until he resigned in December. And I really believe that on that one specific thing that you just talked about, you're negotiating healthcare for 300,000 people in Connecticut. It's the retirees, it's their families, it's all the state employees, plus, Paul, an additional 70,000 municipal workers who get their insurance through this thing called the partnership plan, where towns leverage the power of the state to save money on healthcare. You can make a big difference.
All right. So now, do people feel that, are they convinced when you talk to them? Are they paying attention? Do they want you to run?
Well, listen, I'm getting a lot of encouragement from around the state. I'm the only Democrat so far who's expressed an interest in this office.
They're clearing the lane for you if you want it.
Yeah, I think that I've got the support that I need should I decide to make this choice. But as I said to you and to other people, I really genuinely was exploring here because I have two jobs that I love. I love running the airport. I love being a state rep from my hometown. I get a lot of good stuff done in both those jobs that I'm really proud of. And the question for me is always, can I make a bigger difference in this job? I believe that I probably can, but I just have to, get out there and talk to people and learn what's on their mind.
So when are you going to decide by?
Well, I think pretty soon. I've been doing this for about a month and a half now. I'm starting to get out there in person. I've had a chance to talk to, I don't even know how many of these DTCs and talk to
town committees,
a lot of different stakeholders across the state. But I'd say pretty soon. I have to decide. The convention is 65 days from today. Not that I'm counting, but it's coming up pretty soon.
And you also have to decide whether your state rep seat is open.
That's true, yeah. So a lot to think about, a lot to talk about with my wife and my family. But if I decide to do it, I do believe the support is there for me.
All right, we're talking to Sean Scanlon, who runs the airport. He's a state rep from Guilford, and he is the one Democrat currently exploring a run for state comptroller. You're if you run, you'll be probably running against Mary Fay, correct, from the Republican, or is there a couple there?
So far, I think she is the only candidate. I don't know much about her, but
she came in.
Yeah, okay.
Very nice woman. She ran against John Larson for Congress last time.
Okay.
And he coached her high school basketball team.
Interesting. Yeah.
And it might have been the only race where people said very nice things about each other.
Yeah, well, that's
like,
good. We need more of that in politics.
She's very conservative. And she said she was a former senior finance exec with GE, Sun Life, AIG, so she said she has those skills.
Yep.
She's making the argument that you need someone from the other major party, from the one running government, to serve as a watchdog as comptroller. She's also called for tapping the state surplus more, which has been a Democrat versus Republican issue over the last couple of years, making more realistic assumptions about expected annual returns on pensions, that their comptroller should be at the table for union contract negotiations, and that she promised to keep a closer eye before signing off on no-bid contracts. So tell me about those.
Well, there's a lot there. Obviously.
Okay, let's start with more realistic assumptions about expected returns on pension. Is she right?
We've done it.
Tell me about that.
Well, a couple of years ago, we were having a big problem in the state about the fact that we did have unrealistic expectations. And because of that, we were dramatically underfunding our pension contributions. And we changed that a few years ago. I don't remember exactly what year. I'd say it's at least 4 or 5 years ago now that we've done that. And we've taken great strides to get our pensions in a better space.
So what did the assumptions go from to for expected returns?
Well, again, it's basically that you have a more realistic rate of return.
Right.
The treasurer handles that. Now, this is an important distinction here. This is really wonky, but the treasurer is the one who actually does the investing. The comptroller is the one who actually sets up the benefits. So if you're a state employee and Paul Bass is the state employee, you come to the comptroller's office to get all your stuff done. And the pensions are actually being invested on by the state treasurer.
Are you both on the pension board?
Yes, of course. You're both part of that.
So you have a say on what if they're saying we're going to earn 3% returns or 2.5 or 3.5.
You do,
correct?
but again, what I'm saying is that you've actually seen us change that. But more important than the rate of return is the contributions to the pension. We have about $95 billion of unfunded liability right now. And we had a very, very big problem, frankly, under Democrat and Republican rule, both governors and legislators, of dramatically underfunding those pensions. We now are finally on a better track with those, but we have to keep up the momentum.
We still have $95 billion. Was it more before?
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, it grows, right? It grows about 4% every year, which is not good, obviously.
And obviously, for someone who's ignorant like me, it's not that you're supposed to have zero, correct? Aren't there actuarial standards that you're supposed to have a certain amount?
Well, it's certainly actuarial standards. $95 billion is not good, though, right? And the
So
reason we have $95 billion is because from 1939, when we instituted the pension, to 1971, they set aside $0 for the pensions. From 71 to 2010, sparingly. From 2010 to today, we actually have been doing pretty good. We're making big payments, but unfortunately, what's happening, or what was happening, was, Paul, they were growing to unsustainable levels of our budget and crowding out other services. And so what we had to do a few years ago was to re-amortize those pensions, to spread them out over time, and then commit to actually making the payments. One of the things where a comptroller can make a big difference, and it did make a difference, was Kevin Lembo. He created this thing called the volatility cap. He spearheaded this thing. And while we can get into the details of that if you want, basically what it did was, because we have such volatility when our income tax, because when Wall Street is doing really well, we collect a lot of money. When it's not, we don't. He basically said, hey, let's set aside some of that money from the volatility cap so that when things are not going well on Wall Street, we don't have these boom or bust budgets. What happened because of that is today we have a $2 billion surplus in the current budget year. We have a $3 billion rainy day fund. And last year, about the pensions, we were able to make a $1.6 billion excess payment on top of the $3 to $4 billion we pay every year to the pension fund, which chipped away 3% of our entire unfunded legacy, which to most people listening is like 3%. Who cares? But 3% again next year and the year after, that's almost 10% we shave off that pension.
If I'm not mistaken, that the Wall Street, the credit rating agencies did cite that when they approved our bond rating.
Of course, because for the first time in a long time, Connecticut is getting very serious about our finances and doing a very good job and getting us on a better fiscal foot. I do credit Kevin for that. I certainly credit the governor for that. And I think the legislature has made some big decisions recently that actually is helping that.
And it's interesting to me that the argument seems to switch the parties for me. It's the Republicans who said we should tap more into the rainy day fund, whether to cut taxes or whatever, and the surplus. Whereas Lamont, who kind of has a fiscally conservative tradition, has said we got to keep our reserves for when times aren't as good. Is that sort of the way you see it?
I split the difference a little bit. I do think we have some room to cut taxes. I'm actively working on that right now.
As
the
the debate is sales or property. What do you think?
Of the Finance Committee. Well, listen, I think that the other side is focused on sales a lot, and the gas tax. I think those are mostly, in my view, gimmicky compared to real structural reform. I think finding a way to actually cut taxes for working class and poorer people is the best way that we can make the use of that money. But again, I'm not suggesting that you take all of that surplus and cut taxes with it. I'm suggesting that if we did something like my child tax credit proposal, which I put forward last year, $600 per child, up to 3 kids, to the average family listening in New Haven, if you have 2 kids and you're making the median income in Connecticut, that's a $1,200 income tax cut, 40% tax cut. It's the largest tax cut in the history of Connecticut. It would make a big difference to these families.
Is that on the table this year?
It's on the table this year. But that, to me, is a more substantial tax cut than shaving a couple percentage points off of the sales tax.
And then the other issue is, do we ever raise tax on the wealthy, which Lamont has taken off the table? Because since 2014, we have never gotten the numbers until yesterday, right?
Yep.
About how much working class people pay in taxes versus how much the wealthy pay.
Sure.
So you guys have asked for a study as a first step from the Department of Revenue Services so you can make that kind of judgment. And what we learned yesterday is that people making under $45,000 a year in Connecticut pay 4 times as high percentage of their income in state and local taxes than people who make over, what's the figure there, over 75,000.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
It's a big problem.
So what do we do with that?
Well, you try to make the tax code fair.
Can you raise marginal tax rates for people above $1 million or $500,000? Or is that just too much off the table?
Whether we need to in the future, I think, remains to be seen. But we don't have to do that right now in order to cut taxes for the people that report says are getting screwed over right now because of our tax rates. And that is what I'm focused on right now, is how can we lower the tax incidence for those working and middle-class people and do so without necessarily driving out the top earners who do drive a lot of money into our state coffers every year. And I think we can do that by just offering, $300 to $400 million of tax relief to these families while keeping $1.5 billion of our surplus.
All right. And what about the no bid contracts? That's obviously been in the news because of the controversy about hazardous waste contracts, as well as pressure on local communities from the Department of from the Budget Office to hire no bid contracts, hire a select group for their school reconstruction. So what role would Comptroller play there? 2
different issues there. On the no bid contracts, the Comptroller's office has to sign off on every purchase request of the state. And while the state auditors do their thing and they play an important role, what we have not seen is a Comptroller who uses the power of their office to actually audit a lot of things and use that auditing as a way to sort of open up the books. This is going to be very in the reads for most of your listeners, but the most famous Comptroller of human history is this guy named Jacques Necker, who was the Comptroller of sort of France during the time of the French Revolution.
What's his last name?
Necker, Necker. And what this guy is famous to history for, Paul, is because he, for the first time, he was in a dispute with the king over what was happening with the state's finances. And he said, you know what, King, I'm going to release this to the public, and they're going to see exactly what I'm talking about. And the king said, nobody will ever care if you release this. And so he released the budget. It's called the Compte Rendu. I'm probably not doing that right in French. And it was the first time in Western democracy or in Western governments that anyone ever released the state budget. It became the best-selling book in France of that time. And it shows that through the power of your office, you can shine a light on things. And I would do that if I was ever elected Comptroller, because you can use the power of your office to audit things, even though you're not the state auditor.
Would that include no bid contracts?
But you're signing off on every contract in the state. And so if there are things that are going wrong, then you have to look into that. I don't think that anything did go wrong here. I trust the governor. I think his explanation has been very thorough. And I do not believe there's any no bid contract there when it came to testing. But I do think that office can restore confidence by making sure that you're routinely releasing information about the statistics of that kind of stuff. On the school construction issue, my committee is having a hearing on that next week.
Which committee?
The Finance Committee, to bring in the folks that are involved in school construction to ask them questions about what they've done. Obviously there's an FBI investigation going on surrounding one individual who, is alleged to have done some pretty serious things that were bad. But I think we need to give people the confidence that there's not widespread corruption here. And I think in that hearing, you'll hear people from the state explaining exactly what's going on.
And okay, we got 5 minutes to go. And so you're going to become a best-selling author. That's the real reason you might run for Comptroller.
I didn't hear you, Paul. Sorry.
You want to become a best-selling author. That's the real reason.
I would love to become a best-selling author, though.
Everybody's going to read.
I don't think it's going to be this
budget.
time. My career aspiration, I love spy and crime novels.
No, but you said you're going to write the book. You're going to release the book that everyone will read.
Oh, I know.
The Fellow in France, which is The Budget.
I don't know that would be a bestseller today, but we'll see.
Okay, let me ask you anything you learned, because people want to ask you about Tweed before we let you go.
I'm sure.
10 locations we're flying to in Tweed.
Yeah.
First time this century we've had more than one.
And we're adding 3 more next week.
3 more?
Yeah.
Where?
Can't tell you.
Oh, come on. You're supposed to say that. So, in my lifetime, we've never had more than one.
Yeah.
That we've gone commercial flight. In a matter of months, we've gone to 13. What have you learned from that, and how is that relevant to being a comptroller?
Well, besides having a son, it's the thing I'm most proud of in my life. People have been trying to do this for 30, 40 years, and I was able to get it done. And it wasn't just alone. We have a great team that I work with. But for years and years and years, people said they wanted more air service. And I took this job despite everybody and their brother telling me it was a mistake. I was going to ruin my career. And we got it done. And we now have those 10 flights. Next week, we add 3 more. And by May, you'll start to see significant flights every day from New Haven.
So some people writing in, like Julia and Patricia, are critical of the Tweed thing. And one thing that was interesting to me is to watch you navigate that. You know how strongly people feel on both sides.
Yeah.
And people in the neighborhood with their concerns about environmental concerns
Sure.
and the business concerns. You navigated that without, in my opinion, ever losing your composure.
Yeah.
Trying to deal with people respectfully when you disagreed with each other. What did you learn from that experience about how to make things happen when people don't agree?
It's all about listening. People are right to be concerned about what's going to happen in their neighborhood. It's human nature. It's understandable, and I understand it. And that's why I go and literally sit at kitchen tables and coffee bars and talk to people about this. There's, a handful of people who will never engage with me. They want to just stop this project, and I respect that. That's fine. But most people, I think, are willing to listen to me, and I'm willing to listen to them. I knocked on doors this summer. I sat down with people one-on-one. People call my office. I call them back. I come see them. And we can find a lot of ways that we can work together.
There's a lot of common ground, and then ultimately there is an unbridgeable difference between people who feel we shouldn't be building regional airports and people think we should.
In some cases, but for example, there was we put up a light in our parking lot that was shining disproportionately brightly on Girard Street, right? And a couple of neighbors called and said, geez, can you turn that light the other direction? I said, sure. We turned the light around, right? No, we found a way to solve that problem. I can't stop, flights from coming in and out of the airport, as some people would maybe want to happen. But we can be better neighbors than we are today. And I've driven myself and committed myself to being a better neighbor. And I think that's why, we've been able to get done a lot what we've done.
Julia asks, what about bringing freight air to Tweed? So one concern is that at some point there's going to be freight air.
Yeah, I've said publicly, I've said it again on your show, looking you directly in the camera, there is no intention or plan whatsoever to bring freight. Even if we had a plan, we actually don't have the room to do it. And even if we had the room and a plan, the city lease of New Haven specifically says that we have to go back to them for permission to ever do freight in this state.
And Patricia says that she feels that the expansion of the airport supports corporate oligarchs who run things. We have Goldman Sachs and everything.
It's not about that. It's about giving more options to the people. We've had 85,000 people come in and out of there since November. Those people are not there because of corporations. They're there because they want to find an affordable way to get to where they want to go. And we've now given them that option to go from New Haven.
And finally, what about Ukraine? I mean, it's been happening. It's not a comptroller issue. How are you feeling about that one?
Got to know a lot of the Ukrainian American community when I worked for Chris Murphy as an aide for 10 years. They're a great people. They're a vibrant community here in New Haven, and I'm praying for them and their families. But what Putin is doing is really wrong. Our president is standing up to them, and I think the world is standing up to him, and we have to keep the pressure on to make sure they pull
drama. Back. The way that President Zelensky has emerged as this hero of symbolizing a people who are getting, they converted a craft brewery to Molotov cocktail operation. I mean, people just not standing 41 million people for the country just being run over.
He's done a great job.
It's been interesting.
But the world has to keep paying attention. We can't just let this be one of those other things where we kind of forget about it after 4 or 5 days.
And it's about to get ugly.
We have to keep our attention on this.
All right, Scanlon, thank you so much for coming to Dateline New Haven. It's always a pleasure chatting
Good to be here,
with
Paul.
you. Good luck making your decision in coming weeks.
Thank you.
Thanks for telling us what a comptroller does.
Thanks for your interest.
It really matters.
It does
and
matter.
It's a hard thing to talk about even when there's not a COVID epidemic, inflation, and a war in Ukraine.
Yeah.
So thanks for taking the time.
You're very welcome.
We're going to take a break with the Afro-Semitic Experience performing I Wish I Knew How It Feel to Be Free from the group CD A Plea for Peace. And then we're going to be back with Dory Dumas, the president of the Greater New Haven NAACP. So sit tight with us here on WNHH, New Haven's home for community radio.